I have on the phone with me Dr. Heather Eaton, who is an associate professor of theology at St. Paul University in Ottawa. She holds a Master's of Divinity and an interdisciplinary PhD in ecology, feminism, and theology from the University of St. Michael's College at the Toronto School of Theology. She is the author of Introducing Ecofeminist Theologies and the co-editor of Ecofeminism and Globalization. Past president of the Canadian Theological Association, she is also a founder and co-chair of the Canadian Forum on Religion and Ecology, or C4. In her work, Dr. Eaton explores interreligious responses to the ecological crisis. She is particularly interested in the relationship between ecological, feminist, and liberation theologies, and the dialogues between religion and science, especially that of evolution. Dr. Eaton, thank you for joining us this morning.
Hello, Simon. Thank you for inviting me.
In your article, The Revolution of Evolution, published in the most recent issue of Worldviews, you note that in North America, evolution is on trial again, and is being contested in courts and in several educational and religious institutions. It's being removed from science curricula in both high school and university, and that there is already considerable illiteracy in earth sciences and evolution. In a Gallup poll conducted in 2006, you note that almost half of Americans questioned stated their view that human beings have not evolved, but were created by God in their present form within the last 10,000 years or so. In addition, it was found that religion is the greatest determiner of how evolution is understood. So my first question then is, why is it necessary to have an accurate and comprehensive understanding of evolution when grappling with God and the environmental crisis, and how does a misunderstanding limit our capacity to respond to the environmental crisis?
Most of us in North America are not ecologically literate, meaning we actually know very little about how the earth works. We know very little about bioregions and systems, but we know even less about the emergence of life on earth, which is the evolutionary process. And because we don't know this reality, we don't study it, we don't understand it in depth, and we don't see ourselves as part of this emerging process, then our religious understanding of the world comes from a very recent development in human history and the emergence of what we would call the great world religions. And those function as the reference point for understanding ourselves and the world and the earth. Excuse me, but because we don't have an understanding of evolution, we can't situate ourselves in this process. And so there's a disconnect between the complex emergence of life on earth and our religious awareness. So our religious awareness becomes self-referencing.
Okay. Well, how can evolution be integrated into a religious response to ecological concerns?
Well, first we have to learn it. I mean, we have to understand. We have to understand that the Earth has a history of approximately 4.4 billion years, and religions don't take into consideration this history. I mean, even the most non-scientific person can gain a great deal of insight in understanding what we call deep time. That we are a part of this huge process. And when we do that, we look at our religious texts differently. We look at our understanding of the divine or God. It expands and changes, and we see ourselves as not humans and God on an earth, but as a part of this whole sacred reality we call Earth.
Mm-hmm.
That changes everything. I mean, it sounds simple to say, but if we actually ponder it for long, it changes a great deal.
How? Like you mentioned that, you quote, Earth is not our context, but our source. Mm-hmm. So how does an accurate understanding of evolution impact on our worldview? And how then could that worldview be consistent with a Christian worldview?
Well, I would say the bulk of Christian understanding is that humans are separate from and different from any other life on Earth. I think that Christians have a great deal of difficulty accepting that we are emerging from this process, or that we are in fact primates. Most Christians' understanding, often it's not one that they have given a lot of thought to, but the understanding they operate out of is that humans are quite distinct and that we are the only image of God on this reality we call Earth. Mm-hmm. When we take evolution seriously, we realize we're one of many primates in a long history of primates, in a long history of this complexity, what we call emergent complexity of life processes on Earth, all of which have some kind of sacred dimension. Someone like Thomas Berry would say, everything is a mode of divine presence. So humans are a particular mode of divine presence, but everything is a mode of divine presence. Mm-hmm. And that changes what we see and what we feel and what we think. And it, in my experience, it expands our understanding of God. But it does challenge some rather simplistic understandings of Christianity.
Yeah, because in your article, "The Revolution of Evolution," you quote a rabbi. Let me just regarding Rabbi Schachter, that who states that many religious structures have become ossified remnants of another time.
Yeah.
All traditional systems, Moses, Jesus, Mohammed, Buddha, were embedded in the social and economic systems in which they arose. Their reality maps are a little obsolete. And then you continue. It is an understatement to say that religions need new reality maps in light of evolution, especially in the context of the ecological crisis. Mm-hmm. So,
what does that mean?
Well, yeah, is traditional religion then equipped to respond to the ecological crisis or even to accept the phenomenon of evolution? Do we need new wineskins?
Right. Well, that's a great question, and it's not answered simply, but the quick answer would be, what do we think religions are? I mean, if we have an evolutionary view, religions are a dimension of human consciousness. So it's our expression, our experience, that we call it a sacred dimension to reality. And all the great religions emerged in a period where there wasn't an ecological crisis. So we are in we are in the sixth great extinction. We are in a massive ecological crisis to which we have very little capacity to respond in any of our cultural systems, including religion. Mm-hmm. So one of the first steps is to start thinking about what is the nature of religion. I mean, do we really think that religions are going to be intact forever in that current form? Most of us know that religions are not equipped to deal with gender or feminism, but they are adapting. They can adapt to new realities. Mm-hmm. So one question is, what kind of truth are religious truths? What are they really all about? Mm-hmm. And they are a response of a human to what we call a sacred dimension in reality. So the answer to the question is yes and no. Thomas Berry says religions in their current form cannot respond to the ecological crisis, but we cannot respond without them. Mm-hmm. So we have to become aware that we are in a moment of huge religious transition as well as ecological transition. The religions of the world are changing, and we're seeing two very distinct trends. One is to a more fundamentalist, rigid understanding of religion, and we're seeing this in all religions, including Buddhism, Judaism, Christianity, and definitely Islam. Mm-hmm. But we're also seeing trends in religion that are going to multi-religious awareness, expanding their horizons, realizing that religious truths are not quite as straightforward as we thought they were, that they need to be in dialogue with each other. That's the conversation where evolution can come in, that we need to start dialoguing with science. We need to dialogue. We need to understand deep time. We need to understand we're part of very large processes of the universe and of the earth. Mm-hmm. Well, and can they adapt? Yes, they can. Of course they can, but we have to do the work.
Right. Well, then how must religion be approached and conceived if an integration with evolution is to be successful? Should there be a privileging of either of one over the other, religion over science or science over religion? And if so, how and why?
I would say not. I would say there's not a privileging of one over the other. I think we have to try to understand what kind of knowledge is scientific knowledge and what kind of knowledge is religious knowledge.
Right.
And I think they both contain deep kinds of truth. Mm-hmm. So science is not as factual as it seems, and religion is not as solid as it seems. But religious truths are true, but not in an objective way. They're true in a symbolic way. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the dialogue is absolutely critical, but to approach it, we can't have a simple understanding of religions as some kind of objective truth.
Right.
It's just not possible. They can't dialogue with science in that way. And science can't come forward and say religion is all just projection and imagination. And we have hard data to prove, for example, that the universe is, or the Earth is determined. Some of the books that have come out, The God Delusion, I'm sure you've Richard
Yes.
Dawkins' book, The God Delusion, where he says religion is an evolutionary remnant.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that's true either. I think religious insights are deep and extremely profound.
Well, you mentioned religious consciousness, and would you explain that, or what do you mean by religious consciousness as in your discussion of the validity of religion, where religion is important?
Well, there's quite a lot of work that's being done on a book, for example, by Terence Deacon called The Symbolic Species, or another book called The First Idea, of people trying to understand how did humans as a species develop what we call a symbolic consciousness, because absolutely everything we do every day is symbolic. The way we dress, the way we think, the way we organize our cultures, our religious symbols, the kind of trinkets we have in our houses, everything we do is symbolic, including language.
Mm-hmm.
So we talk about a symbolic consciousness, which seems to be privileged in Homo sapiens, or humans.
Mm-hmm.
That is the terrain of religious consciousness. Religious consciousness is symbolic by definition, but it comes out of who we are as a species.
Mm-hmm.
And religious consciousness seems to indicate that we do have a sense of a beyond in our world, and we also have a sense that there are levels of reality that we can't actually see concretely. So we might call that sacred. So if we stand in front of a forest, we might see a piece of real estate, but we also might see a sacred grove. So there are dimensions to us that we need to pay attention to, and religious consciousness comes out of a very deep dimension of the human.
Well, okay, that leads to my next question then. What does religion bring to the discussion of ecology and evolution?
Well, what defines humans, if we go back even 200,000 years, any kind of evidence of the human is that they were thinking about their world in symbolic terms, and that a sense of the sacred seemed to develop quite early on in Homo sapiens. Mm-hmm. And what humans consider sacred, they don't destroy.
Right.
And that the earth, in its rhythms and its limits and its natural seasons and its beauty and its challenges have all been interpreted as a religious dimension. Mm-hmm. So we have all of the elements, earth, wind, fire, water. They've all been interpreted in every religious tradition one way or another as some kind of symbolic representation of the sacred. Mm-hmm. Until very recent times. The earth has been absolutely core to religious understandings of the world.
Right.
So there's another dimension of people don't destroy what they consider to be sacred, but in industrialized countries right now, the earth does not figure on the religious imagination. It isn't something people experience as sacred unless they spend enough time in the natural world, and it's very easy to become marveled by the natural world. Meister Eckhart said, all we have to do is spend a bit of time with a caterpillar, and we'll never have to go hear a sermon again.
Right.
So there's something about religious consciousness. It is an experience of the human to experience this overwhelming, abundant, beautiful, sacred, divine reality. We can experience it, and we can articulate it, and then we will protect it.
Right. So I guess then nature then can be a source of revelation. Scientific discoveries can be valued as revelations of the divine?
I think so. I mean, maybe not in their direct form, but what we call revelation has to do with contemplation, has to do with wisdom, has to do with wonder and awe, has to do with ethics. All of these things are part of what we would call the world of religion. And these are also very much a part of the Christian tradition, but it's not necessarily very activated these days. But they're all a deep part and a central part of religion, right, including Christianity. And ethics can be a source of how we behave after those experiences, so to speak.
Okay. Well,
sorry, the natural world is revelatory. Yes, it is, but not just simply. That was a long answer. Sorry.
Right. No, I know, and we only have about 3 minutes left. But
sorry.
So if that's so, then how do you reconcile that with other sources of revelation? If we are to use new wineskins, for instance, how do you? And this is a big question, I guess, for 2 minutes. But how do you reconcile revelations of nature with that of Scripture, considering the many factual contradictions, for instance, between the creation account in Genesis and evolution? Sure.
Well, oddly enough, the first creation account in Genesis is pretty accurate in terms of its evolutionary understanding. Mm-hmm. Well, the Celts would say there were two sources of revelation, earth, nature, and Scripture. Mm-hmm. So that's how they came to understand it. And we have most recent Christians, meaning in the past few hundred years, only look at Scripture. But their understanding of what Scripture is, I think, is not very developed sometimes. People read Scripture as if it's some kind of truth, but Scripture was the way those people experienced God in their life and their world. So Scripture has deep truths to it, but it isn't history. Like the creation story in Genesis is a myth. It's a mythic story.
Mm-hmm.
And the evolutionary story is also a mythic story. See, they're both mythic. They are deep stories of how we understand ourselves in this world, surrounded by animals and surrounded by, it is an incredibly complex Earth system.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
These are creation stories. So what we need is, we need to understand that Genesis is a creation story. We need to understand that evolution is offering us a creation story. We need to understand that religions have to attend to the facts of their time.
Right. All right. Oh, go ahead.
And we are the first, evolution is very new. It's a very new understanding of the world in terms of a longer perspective of time.
Mm-hmm.
But we haven't integrated it yet.
Right. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Eaton.
Thank you very much, Simon.
And so we've been speaking with, I've been speaking with Heather Eaton, an associate professor of theology at St. Paul University in Ottawa.